Howdy folks, my name is Bucket Fridge. I hope you're all doing very well today. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel. In today's video, we have something pretty special. It's the newly released Vengeance Demon Hunter trees that we've all been waiting for. I'm really excited to see these and get it tested out a little bit and go down the tree. So after a little bit of housekeeping, we'll hop right into the talent trees. Don't go anywhere. Alrighty, a little bit of housekeeping. First thing I wanted to say is if you are interested in all things tanking, this channel primarily focuses on tanking. I'm going to break down all the different talent trees that we have for all the tanks so far, and as they get updated, I'm going to be updating videos as well. So if that is something that interests you, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can catch all the different tank videos coming out. And the second bit of housekeeping is I always just preface that this is my personal opinion on the matter. I always encourage all of my viewers to be able to go and find as many content creators as you can, watch all the videos that you can, all the footage you can, all the articles, etc., and make the decisions that are best for you based on the information that you learn and gather. Not everybody has the same desires when it comes to playing World of Warcraft, so whatever works best for you is whatever works best for you. I'm just here to give you my personal opinion and my thoughts on the process. But with that being out of the way, let's hop into the talent trees. Alrighty, so the way that we're going to break this down, we'll do the class tree first, and then we'll do the spec tree second. But before we get into the tree itself, I just wanted to kind of give my general thoughts and opinions on the overall picture of the two different trees. I feel like the Demon Hunter tree, the basic tree, not the Vengeance tree, but the basic Demon Hunter tree is actually pretty solid. A lot of the really good things that Demon Hunter got for Dragonflight actually comes from the Demon Hunter tree and not from the Vengeance tree. The Vengeance tree isn't bad by any means. There's a lot of interconnectivity. There's a lot of things that are new for Demon Hunter, which is actually pretty cool. They're just not very exciting. It's one of the cases where Demon Hunter kind of plays the same on beta that it does on live, with just a few new toys, which I don't think is a bad thing by any means, but it doesn't revolutionize Vengeance Demon Hunter. And sometimes if it's not broke, don't fix it, right? So with that being said, why don't we go down the basic tree and then we can go down the spec tree and figure out what it is I'm talking about. All right, let's start down the Demon Hunter tree itself. There's actually a lot of really cool stuff in the Demon Hunter tree, like I mentioned, so let's hop into it. Alrighty, first thing we're going to take is we're definitely going to take the Hot Feet, which allows our Infernal Strike to have 2 charges. Very, very nice. Always good to be leaping around. And then we are going to take Vengeful Retreat, and that way we can get down this left side of the tree, and you'll see what's pretty crazy down this left side of the tree. That's very, very nice. We're going to increase our Maximum Fury. Maximum Fury is always good. Allows you to generate a little bit more Fury without being Fury capped, which is always very, very good. All right, then we're going to take our Shattered Restoration. Our Shattered Souls is increased by 10%. More healing is very, very good for Demon Hunter, obviously. And then we're going to take the Charred Warblades. You heal for 5% of the fire damage you deal. Very, very good as well. So now we have a few options, but I think because we need to path down this side of the tree, I believe that we need to take Suit here because there is no other node connecting the Illidari knowledge here. I really wish that Disrupt or one of the other points linked down into the Master of Glaives and then into Illidari knowledge. I don't know that I'm a super fan of having to take these two talents, which feel kind of not, they're not super exciting. How about that? Master increases movement speed. Movement speed's good, but is it better than a 10% or excuse me, a 10-yard increase on your Disrupt? Being a ranged interrupt is very, very good, like DKs have, obviously. But unfortunately, we have to take Pursuit here, getting us our 8 points. And so now that we have our 8 points, we obviously need to take some more of our important cooldowns. So for example, we're taking here, reducing the cooldown of Metamorphosis by 60 seconds, or one of our big defensives. Lower cooldown on a defensive is very, very good. And then we're going to take Master of Glaives because we need to get down to the Illidari knowledge, as I mentioned. Taking less magic damage is always really good. Tanks have a hard time dealing with magic damage most of the time, just because of how tanks are kind of designed to work. The best tank for dealing with magic is obviously DK, but being able to just have a flat magic damage reduction is very good for almost any tank, especially Demon Hunter. Alrighty, and then one of the other really cool things that we got after taking the Illidari knowledge, and why we wanted to take this, because it's not only just a very good talent, but Chaos Nova as Vengeance is pretty darn cool. More stuns mean you take less damage on pulls, and it's always very, very good to be taking less damage. Don't underestimate the power of a stun. For example, Shockwave is another very powerful stun that a tank has in Prot, Warrior more specifically. And so having a big stun that you can use right in the beginning of pulls to set up the rest of your abilities is very, very nice. It's really cool to see that Vengeance is getting Chaos Nova. All right, now we need 7 more points to fill out the bottom or the middle portion of the tree, excuse me. So we have some kind of no-brainers. Immolation or increases your armor and causes them to suffer fire damage, and they're going to be suffering fire damage, so that you're healing from the fire damage they take from your immolation aura, on top of getting 20% extra armor. That's awesome, awesome, awesome. And then also we want to definitely take the demonic here. Demonic is so very good. I-beam causes you to enter demon form for 6 seconds after it finishes dealing damage. Incredible, incredible talent already. And then I personally think that the concentrated sigils is probably better than precise sigils, just because the effects are increased by 2 seconds. Even though 2 seconds isn't a huge amount of time, I really do think any extra time on your sigils, which happen to be a lot of your damage, and spoiler alert, we'll be taking Elysian Decree down here, as it is very good, but just having extra duration on your important sigils is awesome, especially when we get down to the sigil of mastery, which makes this even better. So we got 3 points to deal with, and fortunately for us, we can just go blam blam into max health. Max health is very good for demon hunters. You'll notice that most tanks that have a lot of self-healing usually have a larger health pool than tanks who are more of an active mitigation tank, like Prot Warrior, for example. So like Blood DKs, Bear Druids, and Vengeance Demon Hunters all have very high health pools because part of their kit is healing themselves, and it gives you more wiggle room to play with when you have a larger health pool. That way you don't just end up dead if you don't get enough healing off in time. So increasing max health, even though it is not exciting, very powerful, especially in cases like with Demon Hunter, Bear Druid, or Blood Death Knight, which primarily rely on a lot of their healing. Bear Druid's a little different as they have Iron Fur, but the max health is very, very beneficial, even if it is not exciting. And then lastly, we're going to take obviously our Sigil of Silence. Having a ranged silence is always awesome. And then that gets us down into the bottom part of the tree. And so one of the first things that we get as Vengeance now, which seems incredibly good, is Blur. Blur obviously was only a Havoc talent in current iteration on live. Vengeance getting Blur is very, very strong, especially in M+. You'll notice that the dodge by 50% and all damage by 20% is incredibly, incredibly powerful. Very, very good. It's awesome to see Demon Hunters get more defensives. That's one of the things that playing Demon Hunter really illustrated for me personally, was that I think one of the reasons that people might struggle to play Vengeance correctly is just because there are not a lot of buttons that you have to click for your active mitigation or for keeping yourself alive, and most players probably use a lot of their offensive cooldowns like Meta and or Fell Devastation as offensive abilities and maybe not defensive abilities. So seeing Demon Hunter get more defense is awesome, especially on a 1 minute cooldown. That's pretty darn crazy. Next, the other crazy thing that we're getting as Demon Hunter is Darkness. Darkness is incredible. Obviously Havoc only used to have Darkness, but as Vengeance, being able to just put down a giant pool of darkness and heal yourself up while you're using all your other self-healing abilities is very, very strong. That seems incredibly, incredibly good, and I think something that Demon Hunters will run in both M+ and in raiding scenarios, especially because a Demon Hunter tank can sit next to the other tank who's also tanking. If he's getting walloped, he can drop the Darkness for the other tank or himself, which is a really cool idea. And so I really like that having something not only for yourself but for your co-tank, if you're doing a raiding scenario, is actually really, really powerful, because it not only provides obviously a giant heal for you, but it also provides a giant heal for your other tank if need be, and or you can drop it on melee if they are getting slapped too. So Darkness on Vengeance, really, really cool. I like it a lot. And then we'll talk about Sigil of Misery. Obviously not something new, but the improved Sigil of Misery is decent, but we're actually going to take the other one, Misery in Defeat. The reason this is so crazy, enemies take 10% increased damage from all sorcerers for 5 seconds after it expires. And the reason that is very powerful is just because there are lots of packs in both Mythic Plus and in raiding that will be priority swap targets. Think of Council, when one of the ads comes out that gives one of the members a shield and you have to kill them as quickly as possible. Something like this is perfect for those scenarios where it's a hard swap to an ad or to an important target that needs to die very quickly. In M+, it can be a caster mob that is just nuking you if your silences are down or you don't have any defensives, or even just being able to kill packs faster with 10% increased damage from all sources for 5 seconds is awesome, because it not only gives you obviously the 10% damage, but it gives anybody else who is attacking the 10% damage, allowing for some really, really good burst. I think this is totally worth taking in both raiding and in M+. So an incredible talent. And then we're also going to be taking the Hunt, and I personally think that the Fel Empowered Elixir is probably better in a Mythic Plus scenario, where Unnatural Malice is probably better in a raiding scenario. Being able to reduce the cooldown by killing mobs with your Hunt ability, and if you'll know, the Hunt is actually the Night Fae ability on live currently, which is very, very good. It's really cool to see. It's a very fun ability, and it's a very strong ability, and so being able to have a little bit of choice here too. So for example, like I said, in M+, I would probably pick Fel Empowered Elixir, just the way that you're getting reduced cooldown, so this is up more often. 1.5 minutes is already pretty short, but just being able to kill them and get extra cooldown cooldown reduction is awesome. And the pursuit also heals you for 50% of the damage you deal for 30 seconds. So you pull big, then take more damage from your Sigil of Misery, and then you hit the hunt and hit them with a giant ability and a huge dot. And then as they are dying, it's very likely that you could have your hunt ready for the next pull, just because of how much cooldown this could actually provide if you use it at the correct time. Let's say when they're fairly low on life, or maybe about halfway there. It's awesome ability. And then we have 5 points to play around with. So I personally would take something like the increased parry, or any kind of mitigation is always very powerful, especially because Demon Hunter doesn't always have the most defensive. Just being able to take less damage is also very good. And then we're going to increase the duration of the sigils by 2 seconds. Again, our sigils are obviously something very important, and especially when we're taking Elysian Decree, which is already very powerful, as that's what we take on live currently, which is very nice. And then we want to take our quickened sigils as well, again, as our sigils are very powerful. Just being able to make mobs take 10% more damage more frequently is very good, as well as being able to silence from range. Having your Elysian Decree for snap threat on big pulls, it's something that's very nice. And now we have 1 point to play around with. So you have a lot of options here. For example, you could take Demon Muzzle in place of the 3% parry, but this only reduces magic damage, which isn't a bad thing. But for example, if it's an all physical damage dealing pack, let's say an M+, this ability does nothing. Whereas when you have the parry, obviously that gives you an increased parry chance. You could argue that, well, you're not going to be able to parry magical attacks, and that is very true, but I feel like this is more situational than this is. Having more parry is always good, where this is situationally good. So for example, if you were in an M+ where they were dealing lots of magic damage, there's a lot of casters for some reason, you could take Demon Muzzle as opposed to the Aldraki design. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. You could also take the different choice nodes for the improved Chaos Nova, which are both very good. Each enemy has a 30% chance to get more soul fragments, which is also obviously very good, as we're going to be able to use that with our other abilities. Or it reduces the fury cost by 50 and reduces its cooldown by 20, also something very worth considering, especially as we mentioned, pulling big, being able to stun them for an additional second, maybe a little less than a second, probably like half a second around there, and then reducing the fury cost. That's also something you could take. Both of those I think are very viable. The leech here is nice. You gain additional leech while you're in meta, which is obviously very powerful, but I don't know if this is worth taking over other abilities in the tree, as there are some other really nice ones. If you needed to, you could take Consume Magic if there's an ability that you need to get rid of. Making your ranged, or making your interrupt range at 10 yards is very powerful. You could take Imprison if you were doing more of M+. There's lots of different choices that we could take for this last point. It really kind of depends on what you're going to be doing. You could take the different durations of, the longer duration of darkness, or you could take the reduced cooldown. Both are very good as well. There's a lot of options that you can pick. And so I think for now, what we can kind of do is we'll take the Consume Magic, as that is already a baseline ability that we have as Vengeance, kind of rounding out the tree. So this is how I would spec into the tree for a general all-purpose. I think the hunt is both good and single target and multi-target. Obviously the Quicken Sigils is good in both single target and multi-target. So like I mentioned, a lot of the really cool things that Vengeance is getting comes from the actual Demon Hunter tree itself, and not necessarily the Vengeance tree. I don't think there's anything wrong with the Vengeance tree, it's just not very exciting. The awesome stuff really comes from this tree. As I mentioned, having Blur, Chaos Nova, and Darkness all for Vengeance is very powerful. I really like the ability to have more defensives and more ways to be able to control the fight and keep yourself alive as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. More tools to survive is always awesome as a tank. So for now, this is how I would change it, or how I would spec into it, given the current iteration of what we have. Obviously, this is subject to change, but for the most part, I believe that this is something that I would take. Again, there's lots of really good situational things that you could take in the tree. There's lots of really powerful abilities. Unfortunately, I don't think Desperate Instincts is very good. The Blur, you would take an additional 10% less damage, putting it up to 30% reduced damage, which is very nice, but the claws on the bottom. So this triggers when you get below 35 health, but this effect can only occur when Blur is not on cooldown. So for example, this automatically pops Blur for you, but this ability doesn't activate if Blur is on cooldown, which makes it kind of underwhelming, to say the least. I think the other two capstones for this tree are much better. This might be more applicable for a Havoc Demon Hunter, just because you're going to be, less concerned with using your active mitigation to survive big boss hits, etc., as you are a DPS and not a tank. So even though this is good, it's the second half of it is what really makes it kind of a bummer, unfortunately. But that's okay, because Blur in itself is an incredible cooldown, especially on 1 minute. That is awesome amount of dodge and damage reduction. Almost up, will almost be up for every pull in an M+, which is very, very powerful. So again, Demon Hunter is getting a lot of really cool things in the basic tree. So why don't we hop into the Vengeance tree and see what's popping over there? All right, let's go down the Vengeance tree, the moment you've all been waiting for. So obviously these first couple points are what I call non-negotiables. They are stuff you have to take. So now we get to the part where we actually have a little bit of choice. So I think actually you want to take all the different Demon Spike talents here. They're all very good. Demon Spikes obviously is one of our forms of active mitigation, but there are some really cool little buffers they add to it. Also increases your parry chance by 15% for 6 seconds, which is awesome. This gives us another 3% parry chance, so we just have a flat 18% chance of parry on top of our other stats before we even get anything else, which is very, very nice. While Demon Spikes is active, your attackers take damage very similar to like a shield block from warriors, the little shield spike, which is very good. Generates high threat, helps you keep threat during big pulls, very, very nice. And then you take 10% reduced damage after Demon Spike ends, fading by 1% for seconds. So you get 10%, 9%, 8%, etc. But DR is DR. Very, very good. So I think what we need to do is we actually like almost all the things in the middle tree except for the stuff on this right hand side over here. This all has to do with the Sigil of Flame, where I think the abilities coming down on this side are much more powerful. But I forgot to talk about how awesome Frailty is. Enemies struck by a Sigil of Flame are affected with Frailty. You heal for 8% of the damage you deal to targets with Frailty. Frailty is very awesome, but the thing about the Frailty is that it only works with the Sigil of Flame. Down here, there are a lot of abilities that deal with the Sigil of Flame and making it better or improving it somehow, but I think there are a lot of other really powerful talents inside of the middle and the bottom of the tree where I feel like a lot of the time you just don't really have the points to spec over here. But let's go down the rest of the tree. We have 2 points left, so I would do something like this with Roaring Fire. I think Roaring Fire is obviously very, very good, making you heal for more depending on your missing HP, so your Fell Devastation actually can heal you for a substantial bit, making it a very powerful defensive, obviously. And then we want to take our Soul Furnace. Every 10 soul fragments, the damage of your next Soul Cleave is improved by 40%. Soul Cleave is one of our main abilities, very, very powerful. And then we have a little choice node right here between the 5% reduced magic damage while Immo Aura is active, or fire damage increased by 8%. So they actually did add something below this, which is actually interesting. The Soul Barrier is really, really cool. Having an Absorb is very powerful, especially absorbs on classes that heal themselves a lot is a great buffer because it allows you to have a giant absorb shield, which still allows you to heal to full while your absorb shield is active, allowing it to be kind of a buffer zone to keep you in a safe amount of HP. But I don't know if this is going to be worth taking versus just some of the other ones. For example, the fire damage increased by 8%. If you'll remember, we have points over here that heals us for 5% of the fire damage deal. So making all of our fire damage do 8% more damage means we're going to be healing for a larger amount from our charred Warblades, which is very good. Again, the 5 damage while Immo Aura is up from magic is good, but it's again situational. For example, if you went into a fight that again is very heavy on magic damage, something like Demon Muzzle and Fail Flame Fortification are both very good, but it's very situational because it is only magic damage, and to spec into only magic damage to get down to the shield isn't necessarily my favorite. What I would like to see maybe is if these two were interconnected and they both led down to this one, because I would definitely try this out or be more willing to try this out if it was easier to get to, because this again is very situational. Even though it's good, it's situational, not necessarily an auto take in all scenarios. So then I think we got to take our Feast of Souls. You heal for an additional 54% of the attack power over 6 seconds, more healing. Very, very good. And then we have their Void Reaver. Frailty now also causes the enemies to do 4% reduced damage to you for 5 seconds, which is awesome. And enemies struck with Soul Cleave are affected by Frailty as well. So now it's no longer just our Sigil Flame that applies Frailty. It is now also our Soul Cleave, obviously, which is a very used ability on Demon Hunter. So taking, again, less damage is awesome, because if they're dealing less damage to you and then you're healing any of the damage that is done, we're actually getting a substantial bit more tanky, which is really, really nice to see. And then we have 9 points before we get down to the bottom. So I would do something like this, where I take the increased Immo Aura, increases your movement speed by 20% and the duration for 50%. So this will again help us more with the healing from our fire damage because the increased duration by 50%. So it just adds a buffer zone that gives us more healing. I think very, very good. And I feel like this is probably, the tooltip is probably incorrect here. Increasing the duration of demon spikes by 0.0020 seconds seems probably incorrect, right? Like that is an infinitesimal amount of time, especially dropping 2 talent points into it. So I'm going to operate under the assumption that this is an incorrect tooltip, and maybe even if it's by like half a second or something to that effect, even a second, maybe we'll have to see the duration increase. But I think the 0.002 seconds doesn't really make sense. If somebody knows down in the comments below why, if it is supposed to be 0.002 seconds, somebody could enlighten me as to why that would even be worth taking for 2 points. Again, I feel like the tooltip is incorrect, so I'm going to operate under the assumption that this is not necessarily what it plans to be on the live version of Dragonflight. So with that being said, now we have a few choices. So the Collective Anguish is a reduced version of a legendary that we have currently, and so is the Dark Glare boon. Both of these are legendaries that we have currently on live, obviously just a much more reduced version. This only does damage for 5 targets. Anything over 5 targets, the damage starts to get reduced. It's still not bad. It's still a very powerful ability, but is it more powerful than some of the other things we have in the tree? There's a lot of really other nice things to take, but I do think we take Fallout, Immolations, or Initial Burst has a chance of giving you soul fragments. Soul fragments are obviously very important. And then I think we take the Dark Glare boon, even though it's not a full reset like it is on live currently with a legendary, or potential for a full reset, I should say. This is still very good. It reduces 20 to 40% of its cooldown and gives you 20 to 40 fury. Again, getting 20 to 40% cooldown reduction on Failed Devastation is really, really good. Failed Devastation is obviously a gigantic heal and one of our better defensive abilities, so just having that up more often is very, very good, leaving us with 2 points to play around with. So you could take, when Immolation Aura deals critical damage, you get soul fragments, but again, that requires you to crit, and it's not something that you might take a ton of. But what I would do instead, I would actually go down here into Painbringer. Painbringer is awesome. Consuming soul fragments reduces all damage you take by 2% for 4 seconds. Multiple applications may overlie. So essentially they're making our soul fragments or the use of our soul fragments a baby damage reduction, which can stack, which is really, really cool. But in an AoE situation, you could also take Spirit Bomb. Spirit Bomb is something that you take in M+ right now. Very, very good. More healing is always good, but I think Painbringer is awesome. It's a great little DR just for using your kit. I think stuff like that where it's just baked into the kit, making your kit better, is always really, really good. And then we obviously want to take our Ruinous Bulwark. It heals for an additional 10%, and it's 50% of its overhealing is converted into an Absorb Shield. That's awesome. Just because, again, what we explained with the Absorb Shields, having a giant Absorb Shield even after the Failed Devastation ends and heals you to full just allows for a greater buffer of defensiveness. That way you're able to heal up to full, and then any residual healing is then converted to a shield. Awesome, awesome ability. And then I think obviously we take that, and then I think we take Feed the Demon. Very, very good. Reduces the remaining cooldown of demon spikes anytime we consume soul fragments. Obviously something we're doing quite frequently. So half a second reduction every time we're using soul fragments. That's also very, very good. Obviously demon spikes is one of our main sources of active mitigation, and so it's a very powerful ability to have up more often just by using, again, tools in our kit. And then here at the bottom, if you'll remember, Soul Carver is actually from Legion. It's very, very powerful, very fun ability to use as well. Immediately shatter 2 soul fragments from the target and 1 lesser soul fragment from the target, and you're dealing increased fire damage, and the fire damage, as we know, is going to heal us from Fell Warblades. So this is very good. And then we're also going to be taking Unleashing Decree, like I mentioned, in the bottom tree over here, because we have the Quicken Sigils, and the cooldowns are 20% faster. That takes off about 10 seconds or so, maybe a little bit more, and having more Unleashing Decrees is very, very good. Very powerful ability in Unleashing Decree, as obviously is what we take now. So there is an argument to be made that Last Resort is obviously a purgatory, a cheat death, a cheat death trinket, etc. So this could be something that is useful, say in very high keys. It's very powerful. I don't know necessarily if it's better than either one of these, but it is something that's very powerful if you felt like you needed the extra survivability just because you're worried about getting killed in a big pull or whatever it may be. Last Resort is very, very good. I don't know if it's necessarily, again, better than Soul Cleaver or Elysian Decree, but it is something that you could definitely look into taking. Very, very good. good. I think when we take as we're taking Painbringer, we definitely want to go down into Soulmonger. When you're consuming fragments, if it would heal you above your maximum health, it gives you another shield. Again, something very, very good. We're getting a shield from our Fell Devastation. Any over the overhealing gives us a shield, so we get another shield from our soul fragments. So as you can see, we're actually getting quite a bit more defensive, which is really, really nice to see. I really like Soulmonger. And then Frailty now increases all damage you deal to affected enemies by 4%. Very, very powerful, stacking up to 8%. So applying Frailty whenever we use our Soul Cleave and Sigil of Flame is very, very good. And we deal 8% increased damage, again making our fire damage do more damage, healing us for more. So I think these are very synergistic. And then multiple applications of Frailty may overlap. Soul Cleave applies Frailty to your primary target for 5 seconds. So being able to have, again, more uptime on Frailty means we're taking less damage, we're dealing more damage to the enemies, we're healing for more. It's very, very good. And so we are left with 1 point to play around with. You could take Focus Cleave and make it do more damage to your primary targets. Very good. In an AoE situation, you can take Spirit Bomb, also very, very powerful. More AoE damage, more AoE healing, very powerful. You could take Collective Anguish, very, very good as well. You could take the Reduced Magic Damage. You could take the Sheer Fury or Fracture. Both are very, very good as well. So let's just say for a single target raid environment, why don't we take something like Focused Cleave? But then for a Mythic Plus build, you could take Spirit Bomb and or Collective Anguish. I think for M+, I'd probably take Spirit Bomb in its place. This is what I would take for Demon Hunter. Let's talk about this right side of the tree. Obviously, we don't know what that's going to be. And a lot of these, again, have to deal with Fiery Brand, or your Sigil of Flame. And while these are not necessarily bad talents, I don't necessarily think that they're as powerful as the ones on the left side of the tree. I think the ones on the left side of the tree are much, much more powerful and have a lot more applicability, but that doesn't mean to say that this side of the tree is necessarily bad, but I just don't think it has the same power level as the left side of the tree. So, as I mentioned, you'll notice that a lot of the really cool things that we got, don't get me wrong, Soul Carver and Elysian Decree are very, very nice abilities to have back. I really like that they're giving Soul Carver from Legion, and then obviously Elysian Decree from Shadowlands, giving us some of the really awesome pieces that Vengeance has always had. Seeing those back is very nice, but again, I think a lot of the power from the Vengeance tree actually comes from the Demon Hunter tree, because of the Blur, Darkness, the Hunt, etc. are all very, very powerful abilities, where a lot of the things that you'll notice in the actual Vengeance tree itself are a lot of passive abilities, which isn't a bad thing. Like I said, it's not super exciting. It doesn't really revolutionize your gameplay by any means, but that's what I meant by Demon Hunter is just kind of old, reliable, has decent, does what Demon Hunter does currently, but with a little more tricks and bells and whistles come Dragonflight. So I think Vengeance is actually in a really decent place. I really like again, I mentioned the interconnectivity in the tree. I think there's a lot of really powerful abilities in there, but this is just my personal opinion on what I would take. But I'm actually really excited to see how much more inky that Demon Hunter gets with a lot of these really cool new passives and bells and whistles, as I mentioned. With that being said, I think that covers everything in the Demon Hunter tree. If there's something that I missed, please feel free to tell me down in the comments below. I love theory crafting with everybody. I am more than happy to learn all that I can. I'm not saying that I am the foremost expert on everything that there is to know about tanking. I feel very comfortable in tanking, but again, this is my personal opinion. So I'd be happy to hear your guys' opinion down in the comments below. Feel free to leave me a comment. But that's going to do it for the 2 talent trees and my general thoughts on the 2 talent trees. Like I said, I really do think Demon Hunter's in a good place. Let's wrap up this video and I'll see you guys on the other side. Alrighty, folks, that's going to wrap up this video. Just went over the Demon Hunter trees briefly. Thank you everybody so much for watching. Again, if you're interested in all things tanking, this is the channel for you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment down below if you're excited for Demon Hunter, or if you have something that I missed. I'd be happy to hear from all of you. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to be kind, be safe, and I will catch you all in the next one.